Andrew Williams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I take a call on behalf of New Zealand First in the Credit Contracts and Financial Services Law Reform Bill. And it's very appropriate to come after the Minister of Pacific Island Affairs, Sam Lotuiga, who I had a discussion with today on this very subject. And I asked the Minister, would he reconsider the aspect of capping the interest rates, and he advised me that that was not going to be possible, and he gave me various reasons. I'm somewhat disappointed, Minister, because you come from the very area which is one of the most affected by loan sharks, by high interest rates and by racketeers, and the people that you represent and are Minister of desperately need all the protection that they can get. They are the most vulnerable. The Pacifica people. My colleague here, Asanati Loli Taylor, can confirm that in the area of South Auckland, in the Manukau area, these people are very vulnerable. They need every assistance to ensure that they are not ripped off by some of these racketeers. And so it is disappointing that the National Party just can't see fit to go that extra step. They're bringing this bill through, but to go that extra step to put caps on interest rates. Caps have been introduced in the UK, in the USA, in Canada, in Japan, in Australia, and much of Europe. And yet this government says they see no justification for doing it here in New Zealand. And yet so many of our major trading partners, so many of the countries that we have some of the closest contact with, have done this. And therefore there can be no justification for this government saying we don't think it's appropriate to do it, when so many of these other countries, based on a huge amount of case studies and past history in this area, have seen fit to do so. Mr Speaker, it's also most concerning that this will go through, but the suggested SOPs from Carol Beaumont in relation to those caps will be lost 61-60. And they will be lost by one vote, and they'll be lost by the one vote of the Honourable Peter Dunn. And I use the name Honourable very loosely because in this case, if he was to do the honourable thing, he would vote as he voted back in 2010 for the Private Members Bill, the Credit Reforms Responsible Lending Members Bill, which then was in the name of Carol Beaumont. And back then, the United Future Party voted in favour of that bill, and that bill said the amendments to the Credit Contracts and Consumer Finance Act 2003 will require lenders to seriously consider the actual means of a prospective borrower and their ability to service the debt, and will allow for the prescription of maximum annual percentage rates of interest payable in respect of consumer credit contracts. Rules applying caps to annual interest rates now apply in many overseas countries, including the United States, Canada and Australia. That was in that bill, and that bill was lost 59-63, but those who voted included United Future as voting for that. So the Honourable Peter Dunn was happy to vote for that and have caps 3 years ago, and yet recently in the media he has said he has never supported it and did never support it. He has done the usual flip-flop of a minister. As the Right Honourable Winston Peters said, in the case of Peter Dunn, he will double-cross that bridge when he comes to it. In this case, he has double-crossed the bridge when he's come to it, because he is on record, and I have a letter here also confirming that he supported that bill and was sorry that it didn't go through. And he wrote a letter, and I've got the letter here, and he says, I was very pleased to hear from you, and thank you for taking the time to write me and for your comment. I was happy to support this bill and was very sorry that it did not proceed past the first reading. I hope that further progress will be made on this issue in the future. Well, this is the future. Peter Dunn, this is the future. This is 2014. We now have a bill which would allow, if the government accepted the SOPs, would allow caps to go on interest rates, would allow a situation that at the present time where people can be absolutely ripped off with interest rates rising to 3-digit, hundreds of percent. Why should poor, vulnerable people be paying hundreds of percent in some cases when this government has the ability to support putting caps on interest rate? It is just absolutely diabolical in this day and age that this government cannot see sense in doing this when our trans-Tasman sister country, Australia, has done it, where so many of these financial people operate both sides of the Tasman as well. Why should they have constraints in Australia and not constraints here in New Zealand? Doesn't make sense. Why does this government often say, oh, we're trying to harmonise with Australia as much as we can so the business both sides of the Tasman, they know what the rules are, and the banks and everybody else, you know, so we're harmonised. And yet here's an instance where the government will not harmonise with what is happening in Australia. It's just absolutely nonsensical. And in the case of the Honourable Peter Dunn, New Zealand First, what we can say to him is, once again, you're selling out, taking the baubles of office, you're giving the one vote that's required to stop those caps going in, when if you followed what your party's principles stand for, and also we have confirmation that people within the United Future Party are also saying they would like to see these in place. They would like to see that, and they can't understand why Peter Dunn himself is not supporting the capping of rates. And so when Peter Dunn's obviously a one-man show, voting for his own self-interest, not voting on the basis of what many of the people in his own party would say, but he's basically voting to ensure that he keeps his ministerial portfolios, keeps his crown limousine, keeps all the baubles of office, so that he will give the one necessary vote to ensure that credit caps are not put on interest rates. So, Mr. Speaker, in closing, New Zealand First, I just say once again we're very disappointed. We will be supporting the overall bill because the overall bill does significantly help the vulnerable people. It will enhance the whole situation in terms of those who are most affected, who are required credit. But at the same time, we will be, when it comes through the committee stage, we will be expressing grave concerns as to why the government, once again, is letting down the low and middle income earners in this country and not seeing sense by that.
Kanwal Bakshi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to take call on this Credit Contracts and Financial Services Law Reform Bill.